Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma, and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guest today is the brilliant Bill Schmarzo. He's a pragmatic hands-on leader, experienced in establishing, nurturing, and empowering data science and value engineering teams to uncover and monetize the value buried in an organization's data. He's often called the Dean of Big Data, and he helps drive data monetization by integrating design thinking with data science, employing what he calls a rapid exploration, rapid testing, failure empowering, continuously learning methodology. Gosh, that's a mouthful. He's also an influencer and an innovator, a professor and an educator, teaching the Big Data MBA at the University of San Francisco School of Management and National University of Ireland, Galway, School of Business and Economics. And he also lectures to numerous universities and organizations worldwide. Guess what? He's also the author of 4 books. Big Data, Understanding How Data Powers Big Business, the Big Data MBA, Driving Business Strategies with Data Science, and the forthcoming Economics of Data Analytics and Digital Transformation. And he's published over 350 industry-leading articles and educational videos on the application of big data, data science, AI, ML, and IoT to drive data monetization and digital transformation. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please do like, share, and leave your feedback. Thank you for listening. Bill Schmarzo, thank you for coming on to the Data Strategy Show. I tell you, I've been waiting for this one. I really have been. This has been fantastic. And I have been researching everything that you have said. No, not really. Listen, I've got there's too much to say about you. You are the Chief Data Monetization Officer. You're a recognized innovator, educator, practitioner in data science, design thinking, creator of the Big Data MBA. 4 books, including Economics of Data, Analytics, and Digital Transformation. You're at the University of Iowa. You're at the Galway J.E. Kent School of Business. Dude, you're just like, I want to be you. Isn't that a song from the Jungle Book?
Yeah, I want to be like you.
Yeah, exactly. Talk like you.
I want to walk like you, talk like you. It's one of my favorite songs, one of my favorite Disney movies.
Is it?
You hit it.
I didn't even know that, and I missed that in the research. Hey, listen, no, it's a pleasure to finally get you onto the show, and I want to ask you one question first, just a little bit of. I mean, we've already had fun, which is great. How the hell and where did you get this title, the Big Data Dean?
Oh, the Dean of Big Data.
The Dean of Big Data. I mean, I love that.
There's a great story behind this. So, the very first Strata conference was held here in San Jose. God, I don't remember how many years ago.
Oh gosh, Strata. Okay, yeah.
And they were organizing this, and they wanted a session that talked about the business impact of big data and such.
Yep.
And I don't know how they came across me, but the organizers of it said, "Hey, Schmarz, do you mind coming in and doing a 1-hour session on, what does data mean to the business? Why should people care about this?" So I said, "Okay, I'm going to do a session called the Big Data MBA."
All right.
And so I dived in, Michael Porter, value chain analysis, the economics. I just gave the audience sort of a broad overview of why data is important from a business perspective and how it drives value.
Yeah.
It went off very well. Actually, it sort of was a launching point, one of those, Forrest Gump moments, right place, right time. Sometimes in life you just get lucky. And that was one of those things that got lucky. So afterwards, I presented this and I go and I'm speaking on the Cube with Jeff Frick and Dave Devante. I can't remember all the names. John Furrier and such. And so I'm on there, and they said, "Well, Schmarzo, what'd you talk about?" And John Furrier knows me from lives in a neighborhood, so he's like, "Schmarzo, what are you doing here in Strata?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, I had a class called the Big Data MBA, and I kind of walked through the class, and they both looked at each other, Furrier and Frick, and they go, "Wow, you're like the Dean of Big Data." Okay, well, there it was, and that stuck, and that's it. I mean, I know you are the Dean of Big Data anyway, because you are, you do your MBA Big Data class. So let me ask you, you've talked about a number of things there about value creation, the value chain analysis, and so on. I'm going to get straight into it. One of the things that is always a big question that
sits on top of the mind of many CEOs or CIOs or those people who want to get something done but don't know how to do it is, how do organizations identify sources of value creation in their data? Right? This is a big question continuously that I get. I know, I mean, I know how to do it, right? But there's a few people who know how to do it. And I think you're the one. And I think your book, The Economics of Data, Analytics and Digital Transformation, drives those concepts. Yeah, which, you know, I've got, and I'm getting through it and I'm reading it, but
it's not an easy read. It's very dense.
It is. It's a long read, but you know, I like, and we'll talk about some of the concepts and things that you've got in that book. But just tell me about that whole thing around value creation and data. Why is it so challenging for organizations?
You know, Samir, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. It should be the easiest thing in the world. And we err on the fascination with technology. Right. Think about all the great stuff we're doing with deep learning. I mean, holy cow, deep learning can recognize cancer and off of x-rays more effectively than a doctor, and it can do voice recognition. And you think about all these great things going on with technology, and we tend to get so, immersed in the technology that we miss the simple stuff, which is, if you really want to drive value from this, the first step is you need to understand, how does your organization derive value? Right? You sell products, you serve customers, right? There are certain aspects of your business that are sources of value creation. And all we want to do is we want to link the outcomes that drive that value with the outputs that come from AI and analytics and data. The problem is that we tend to want to start with the outputs, the AI, ML and all that great stuff, and figure out how to map it to outcomes. And that's like driving, stakes in the sand and hoping you hit oil. It's such a hard thing to do, right? The easy thing, the brain dead thing to do is, well, let's start with the outcomes we want. Customer retention, reduce operational downtime, whatever it might be. Every organization's got desired outcomes. And then let's work backwards to figure out what analytics do we need, what predictions do we need to make, what recommendations. It's really, really simple if you start with the desired outcomes and the value of those outcomes instead of the other way around.
So it's interesting. You've just said the word brain dead. I think it was in 2014 that I had pretty much this epiphany, right? I was sitting there one day, and I often talk to people about, there is no such thing as, there is no such conversation as a conversation of data. There is only a conversation of value. And I remember walking into into a meeting, one of my clients, I'm sitting there, everybody's talking about data. And I just thought, what are we doing here? And I said, right, stop. We're going to abandon this meeting. They thought I was a nutcase. I walked away, and I literally said, well, reconvene tomorrow, and we're going to sit here, and I'm going to take you through something I'm thinking about right now. And my mind started thinking about very specific things around, we're not even starting with the why. We're not starting with the strategic objectives. All we're worried about is, some bit of tech and some data, and, hey presto, we're going to make magic. And something's going to pop out of that tech and data, and it's going to dazzle us. It doesn't work that way. So, one of the things that you often talk about is pre-work. I talk about foundations. Why is that so important in the context of data, analytics, any of those things? And what are the kind of things that you need to ensure that that pre-work or foundations is done?
So, Samir, you've probably been in many similar situations where somebody in the business side walks up to you and says, I've got some data. Tell me what's valuable in it. Now,
if I had a dollar every time somebody said that to me, I'd
have all kinds of fancy stuff.
I'd have better lighting here.
But it's true, right? Here's the data, and the problem is, unless you know what problem you're trying to solve, can't distinguish what is noise from signal in the data. Right? It's what is you're trying to prove. The same data set can be used to solve all kinds of different problems. Think about the value of a point of sale system. Oh my gosh. Fraud detection, customer retention, and campaign effectiveness. I mean, the use cases go on and on and on. Which one's most important for you? That's the key question. So if you don't do all that pre-work of identifying what problem you're going to go after, What are the metrics or KPIs against which you're going to measure success and
Yep.
progress? Who are the key business stakeholders? What are the assets around which you're going to build analytics? What are the decisions they're trying to make, the predictions? And, you know, if you think about all this stuff that you have to do before you ever
Yep.
put science
Yep.
to the data,
Yep.
right? You can't, the data scientists can't really do anything effective unless they know with very well scoped what they're trying to solve. And by the way, a big part of that, we have a tool called the hypothesis development canvas that we developed, that we fill out in collaboration with the business stakeholders before we ever start the data science work.
Yep.
And the single most important panel in that, I think it's panel 13, is understanding the costs of false positives and false negatives. Now think about it from a data science perspective. How do you know if a model is good enough? Well, you only know if you know the cost of the false positive and false negative.
Yeah.
Is 70% accuracy good enough, or I need 99, right?
Yeah.
Well, what's the cost of being wrong? So there is so much that has to happen first. But when you do that, there's two benefits. When you do all that pre-work, first off, the data science team now knows crystal clear what they're trying to deliver, and all their creativity, innovation, and hyperparameter optimization and data transformation, all that stuff, you know, all those great tricks come to bear. But the second benefit here is now the business already knows how they're going to use the outputs, drive outcomes.
Yes.
That's the key point.
Yes, I agree. Do you know, I would give you a hug right now if I could, Bill. Virtual one. I tell you why, because you've hit on one of my biggest the things that I continuously talk about when I'm talking to my clients. It has got nothing to do with the tech or the data. It's got everything to do with the outputs. And even before you decide what algorithm you're going to use, what, you know, is it going to be a, I don't know, classification or regression or whatever it might be. Listen, there's this ton of work that we need to do before we get there, right? And that is, sorry, go on.
So, and if you don't do that ton of work, if you don't build that sort of bridge with the business stakeholders, you're going to come up with all kinds of great outputs that never get turned into outcomes.
Yeah. And here's the thing, you know, in that statement that you've just said there, you've said that it's a stakeholder influence process, right? This is no namby-pamby stuff around culture or anything like that. However, it's not guff, but it is true cultural transformation. And from my point of view, I think you hit on something which in the book reminds me, and you know, you talked about a canvas, right? I have this you know, diagram from, when I think about data strategy, it's a number of components all stuck together. But I've devised what I call a decision map canvas. I've got a data accelerator canvas. And they kind of work, but they can only work if I'm working off the business objectives, if I know where it's being driven. But interestingly, in your book, which I really love, which not a lot of people apply it to the process of decision science or to any kind of analytical thinking, or even just trying to think of what the use cases are. You talk about, you know, a big portion of what you do is design thinking. Why hasn't that kind of, you know, hit into the way of analytics? I certainly use it in a huge way because I see it completely valuable in what people do. But why is it not seen as the things that every company should be doing, especially when they talk about we want to be customer centric? You know, we're a product company and now we want to be customer centric. Well, you got to do this stuff before you actually get to customer centric values. So why is design thinking so important?
I think part of it is it is still very new, that there in the last, I mean, to be honest with you, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I mean,
how did you get onto it then?
A friend of mine who is very good friends with a senior data scientist at Google.
Okay.
So I was very curious as far as, you know, why is Google so damn effective with their data science? I mean, yeah, you get a lot of the best people, but I've run into a lot of really smart data scientists who couldn't deliver crap. And these folks deliver really valuable stuff. And so I bought him a coffee, and we here in Palo Alto, and we're talking. I said, okay, you need to understand, why are your data scientists so much more effective than the average one? And he smiles and he goes, design thinking. I was like,
and you,
what the hell? What? Design thinking? What is that? He goes, you never heard of design thinking? I said, I have no idea what design thinking is. He goes, come with me on Friday. I'll take you over to Stanford to the D school, their design school.
Okay.
Let's spend a day there working through some of their exercises and just kind of mapping and following and shadowing them. I said, sure. I mean, cup of coffee. It's a cheap date, right? Absolutely. So I go there and I realized that many things that I did have very much design thinking constructs to it around the area of ideation, right? How to run a facilitated workshop, how all ideas are worthy of consideration.
Yep.
The concepts around, first you diverge with ideation, then you converge and prioritize. My whole vision workshop process leveraged unknowingly lots of design thinking techniques. Sure. But then I learned a ton more. Customer journey maps and service designs and personas. It's like, oh my God, I'm just drooling, because these design thinking, we talked about doing all that homework before we ever start putting science to the data. A lot of that's design thinking. Like, I love a customer journey map. I want to know not just what a customer is doing with my products. I want to know what happens that has that customer start even thinking about using my product. And then I want to know what happens after they use my product. I want to understand everything, because you know why? There's value being created all through that process, and I want to be able to tap into that value. So the design thinking was a very natural addition. So what did I do? And I got a patent around this, right? How did I integrate design thinking and data science together in a methodology, right? And because they're both very, think about what data science does. It's very trial and error centric. You try lots of things. You're exploring different things. You learn through failure. It's like, holy cow, data science and design thinking are like different sides of the same coin. But
actually, they kind of merge, don't they? They sort of,
I've got a great graphic that shows how the 5 stages of design thinking and the 5 stages of data science, they're like this. They're very, very similar. But here's the thing that I've learned in the last couple of years, Samir, is that design thinking is great at ideating, and bringing people together. But I've also started to see design thinking being used. I have a friend, John Morley, who is the master of doing this. He worked with me at Hitachi. And if God, hopefully he'll work with me wherever I go next. But he's masterful at how he uses design techniques to drive organizational alignment. And I can't go into details on what we've done from execution perspective, but we had an exercise where I was previously, where we had very divergent views between product management, engineering, the data science team, and marketing. And so we ran a process, something we called innovative doing, which was a long process where we really worked with the different groups, understood the assets that they brought, understood the overarching intent, aspiration of where we were going, and came up with a solution. Instead of settling on the least worst option, we were able to synergize across all the assets people brought together to come up with the best option. And so now I am totally sold that if I believe that what's the biggest challenge organizations have is how do you go from outputs to outcomes? That the challenge here, while there's an AI, ML technology challenge, a data challenge, there is a cultural challenge that using these canvases like the ones you have can help us start to address how do we change the organization to start exploiting the unique economic characteristics of data and analytics.
I find that fascinating, and I'll tell you why. And I think that's a great way to classify that kind of work, because a lot of the time you will get into a workshop and you'll start to facilitate the vision and so on, and start to bring it down into maybe use case sort of views and what we're going to do. But not everyone is always in that room, right? And the disruptors are outside of that room. And I think when you bring a canvas into a room, when you start to strip everything back and start to map out what the conditions are, you start to see the gaps, and you say, no, we've got to get Mary from so-and-so because she's not here. If she's a product designer or a product engineer, hell, we've got to have that person in the room, and that's the person who's going to, essentially torpedo what we're doing. So I think the cultural aspect is huge in this area. And
you couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've nailed it.
Yeah.
if you don't take the time up front to identify all the different stakeholders, those people who either impact or are impacted by that initiative, and give them a chance for their voice to be heard, to understand their assets they bring to the problem, to embrace the diverse perspectives they have. If you don't bring them into the process, more projects die due to passive aggressive behaviors than they do to technology. Right?
Absolutely.
If you haven't brought that person in, they will not support you. In fact, they may even work to undermine you.
And it's interesting because Peter Aiken, who's on the show last week, actually said to me, 5% is the technology bit. It's 95%, which is the people and process, which kills it all. Yep. So why is there such a small amount of attention paid on culture? It's increasingly the thing that will, break or make a program or an initiative.
Here's what I think the challenge is, why culture is so hard, because it means that executive management needs to let go.
Yes, absolutely.
And it means that executive management needs to understand that they're maybe not the most knowledgeable person in the room, that there are probably people at the front lines of either in customer engagement or operational management of the organization who know more. If you're trying to improve the operational uptime of a theme park, do you want to talk to the general manager of the theme park or the technicians who day to day are wrestling with that problem?
Absolutely. We know.
Right. We know who knows the problem. We know who has ideas what to do, right? And so I think what we're seeing, generally speaking, is it's a holdover from maybe from my generation, where the command line structure, command and control, organizational box, you fit into a box, and by golly, don't you ever leave that box. You box people in, and that is a ramification here, so that if you can't get the frontline people, if you can't empower them, then you're never going to have the cultural change, no matter how many times the CEO says, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Well, trust me, I've not seen it yet. So, so I think that's the problem. It's an executive management challenge, and you'll find a few, but not many senior executives who are willing to give up control to the people on the front lines. But when you do that, that's when you really change the game. The technology can support that, obviously,
sure,
but the technology can't replace that.
No, and I think you've got a label for this in your book, which is called value engineering.
Yes.
Which is, I like the term because I know, you and I dislike. Shall I use the word dislike because it's less than what I would have said? But dislike the term data driven, and I've always loved the term value driven. So for me, value engineering is, someone might look at it and say, "Oh, value engineering. Well, I'm not going to do some feature engineering on my algorithm." No. So take us through your view of what value engineering is, and how that helps us do this pre-work, and cajole the impetus, because I will come to the other term that you use, which on the cover of your book, which is a term that has become so synonymous with not achieving digital transformation.
Is there a more meaningless word in the world? Can we group that in with jumbo shrimp? Jumbo shrimp and digital transformation. Well, let's talk about value engineering, because
let's do
value engineering, I think, is a true discipline. And I've known a few people who have done it who are really good at it. And that is, in order to have the value engineering process, must start with what's important to the organization. What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to increase same-store sales, reduce attrition, or if you're a hospital, maybe trying to reduce unplanned readmissions and hospital-acquired infections, right? So every organization has a business initiative that has some value attached to it, right? If I can reduce hospital-acquired infections by 10%, it's worth $35 million a year for me. Okay, I like problems.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
I want to find something that has demonstrable, quantifiable value. So That's step one, is you need to understand what's the thing of value. And in particular, try to pick things that are of focus over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
I don't like things that are 5 years out, because management team, it's,
Yeah.
I ain't got no time for green bananas, folks. So I want things that are going to be hit right now, right? So once you've done that, then what's really key, and we've talked about this, is step two is to identify the stakeholders.
Yep.
Those people who either impact or are impacted by that business initiative. Right. And you need to be able to identify those people, because you're going to want to bring them into a process. You're going to interview them. You're going to run workshops. Well, what you want to find out from each of those different stakeholders are what are the decisions they're trying to make in support of that business initiative. Now, the beauty, the thing I found about decisions is that every business stakeholder I have talked to in my 40 years in this industry can tell you like this. What they're more important is they know the decisions. Decisions haven't changed in generations, right? What's changed by virtue of the data and analytics are the answers. So if we understand the decisions, we go through a process to identify, validate, value, and prioritize the decisions, which end up clustering, by the way, a term you used earlier, use cases, right? There's a number, each one of these business initiatives probably breaks down into 10, 12, 14 different use cases. And now you need to prioritize those use cases. Which one are we going to do first? Which one has both the high, a good balance between high value and high feasibility? What is the, what are the dependencies on use cases? Maybe this one, maybe use case A is the most valuable one, but I got to do B and C first
before I can. Exactly.
So you got to have that. You need to come up with a roadmap that shows the use cases, but also clearly articulates back to all the stakeholders. This is how this roadmap is going to drive value to you. Right. The first use case, and by what we find is you go on a use case by use case basis, it changes everything. First off, each use case has an incredible ROI. It isn't unusual. Our first use, I just did a project where our first use case, I think the project was going to cost them $800,000. The use case was valued at $28 million. 800,000. I mean, well, it's a hard decision. I don't know, right?
And it's interesting you say that, because a lot of the time you see organizations not doing it because they don't believe that the outcome is going to be there.
Right. So you do proof. So you do a proof of value. So you say, okay, I'm going to prove. Now it's going to cost you some money. It's going to cost you, maybe $300,000 to prove it, or $200,000. But by the way, everything we build in a proof of value
is going to be. Agreed.
So you do have to have a process. And what I like about the use case by use case approach, number one, death of big bang. You don't need to go out and spend 20 or $30 million for a big data analytics system and wait 5 years for something to happen and hope at the end something of value squirts out, right? No, you can do these projects 6, 9, 12 months, 6 or 9 month projects, bang, bang, bang. And if you do this use case by use case process, and the Schmarzo digital economic value theorem kicks in, right? Where I can build out my data lake use case by use case. I don't need to put 24 data sets in my data lake.
Exactly. So you're doing data by data, you're doing your discovery, you're bringing what you need, and then you're kind of saying, okay, so, this is good. We've done what we set out to do. We've got the 28, whatever it is, million, or it could be a portion of that because we know we're getting over time. So, and I think that's the interesting thing, because you talk about, and I wrote it down earlier on, and I think this is what you're talking about, Schmarzo's, I don't know what the expression was.
Economic digital value, yes, asset valuation theorem, yes.
So,
my Nobel Prize.
That's a mouthful.
Nobel Prize around my deck for every podcast.
But what I did like was, that you mention it in the book. The economics of learning are far more important, powerful than the economies of scale, and that's what you're talking about there, right?
Yes. The fact that I can use case by use case, build out my data and analytics. So my first use case, maybe you need 3 or 4 data sets. So I put them in there, I curate them, I enhance them, I enrich them. And now those data sets are available to use across an unlimited number of use cases at a marginal cost equal to zero. Right? Right. So I pay the price for that first use case. I pay the price for those first 3 data sets. Oh, by the way, 3 data sets generate $28 million. That's great. I go to my second use case. The second use case says, well, I can reuse 2 of those data sets in there. I need to add a third one, right? I'm only have to pay the marginal cost of that third one. And you can start seeing now use case by use case. I'm building on my data lake. and I'm driving the reuse. And again, what kills the economic value of data are data silos where I can't reuse it. I can't apply this economic multiplier effect, which is really critical. So this use case by use case approach also means that companies literally are printing money. This is the thing that's so insane about it. Use case by use case. First one has 28 million. This one has maybe 14 million in value. This one only got 9. But by the way, the marginal cost for adding another data source was 500,000. So I spend 500,000. I get 9 million. Geez, like every day of the week, right? You're just printing money. But the same thing also holds true for the analytics. If you engineer your analytics, if you avoid orphaned analytics, right, which by the way is a huge problem.
It's an expression that I'd written down after reading the book, so we were going to get onto it, but now you've got onto it, go for it.
Yeah, so the problem with orphaned analytics is that especially in very mature analytic organizations, is the ability to build one-off analytic models to solve a problem. It's easier to build one from scratch than to find one that somebody else has already rebuilt and use that, right? Because when Bob built the first one, he didn't document it. He didn't include the test data. He didn't have all the data pipelining. There's that hyperparameter optimization isn't tuned right. It's never been engineered as a product. And so you have this proliferation of ML models, these orphan analytics across the organization. What happens if you take a use case by use case approach, you build the analytics for that first use case, but you engineer them like a product. So it has all the pipeline and hyperparameter optimization, enrichment.
And that's the foundational elements, right? The pre-work.
That's the foundation. And then once you've done that, I can now use that. Not only can I reuse that analytic module over and over and over again, but let's say on my 4th or 5th use case, one of my big giant brain data scientists figures out how to use a different technique or a different enrichment process or algorithm, right? And makes that algorithm 1% more effective. Every other use case that used that just got 1% more effective for free. And this is the model I hold out here is the Tesla model and their FSD analytic module. So they have a fully self-driving analytic module.
Sure.
Right, it's the heart of their autonomous.
That's how they're learning, right? So
you got 1 million of these Teslas roaming around the streets of the world, learning as it goes along, has AI and ML built into it. It's continuously learning every corner it takes, every mud puddle it drives through, every bike it navigates around safely. Anything it learns, it gets propagated back up to the Tesla cloud, integrated, and then propagated so that so anything that one car has learned, all million cars have learned.
Which is the beauty of that.
And this fully self-driving FSD module is just getting smarter and smarter. It's a brilliant business model. 99.999% of the companies out there don't get it, and it's right in front of us. He's like taunting us with this.
And I think in the book you talk about the curve from going from reactive to proactive to prescriptive to all of the predictive, etc. But then you say, look, there's one more beyond that. And now I understand where you've got it from. You've looked at Elon Musk, you've looked at Tesla and said, they know exactly what they're doing. So this whole idea of automative analytics is probably still way out there, right? But the idea is building to get to that point, because we will get there. Absolutely. We will have self-learning, the algorithms that will do that. And we'll get there. How do you get organizations to think in that way, to really kind of break through and have a mindset change to get there?
There's two things. So one is, I think you need to have this aspirational view that leveraging AI and ML, I can create assets that continuously learn and adapt. So you need to, it's got to be at an executive level that we're going to do this. Number two, you need to have somebody in the organization who owns that, who is not buried under the CIO, right?
We're going to talk about
somebody in the organization who really owns. Okay, right. So I won't go there any further. And I'll let you get there. But you need to have that person who owns this thing, right?
Yes.
And let's go ahead and go.
No, carry on. Because I think where you're going is probably where I'll the segue into it. But
So you need to have this person who really, I'm going to call them a chief data monetization officer.
Okay.
Right? I like that term, right? Not a chief data officer, but chief data monetization officer whose job is to monetize this valuable asset. And they can't sit underneath the CIO.
Yeah.
They got to be able to straddle across all the different product groups, all the different engineering groups, all the different parts of the organization in order to drive this sort of thing. So to me, that's critical. Let me throw one other wrinkle in here. If we don't address the human aspect of it, it will not be successful. And here's the beauty. In the same way that AI and ML can build assets and continuously learn and adapt, well, humans can continuously learn and adapt as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We just need to empower them, right? And we do a crappy job of empowering the people in our organization.
Right. So that's interesting for me because I see it time and time again. So let me ask you a question then. When you're running, you know, in your jobs, in everything that you've led big teams, how do you just give them that carte blanche to say, look, you work for me? Yeah, sure. In this hierarchy of an organization, fine. But actually, you probably know more than me anyway. Yeah. How do you give them that space and time to think differently and to be able to make that decision, you know, without a constant feedback mechanism in there? What's the thing that you do?
So I believe in organizational improvisation. This idea that you can create a team that can morph and move and change depending on the lead on the job in front of you. That you need to empower everybody in your team to be prepared to lead. They're going to have a chance to lead. That you need to empower them to make decisions.
Yeah.
Not punish them when they're wrong, right? But do hold them accountable to learn from their wrong. And maybe it's because, you know, I played college basketball. I also played in a jazz band in college as well. And what you learn from those kind of endeavors is, you know, I was a great lead trumpet player. I was really very, very good.
I cannot believe you played the trumpet. So did I.
Yeah. Ah, there we go.
That's amazing.
So I was very, very good lead trumpet player. I was a big, tall guy, and I could really.
You could belt them out.
But I knew, and I actually had my own jazz band for 2 summers. But I also knew that the guy who played lead sax, tenor sax, was a hell of a lot better than me.
Yeah.
And everybody had contributed in their own way, and you empowered everybody to do what they wanted to do. Sure. So I had some people who never wanted to play solos, and I had some who were damn good at playing solos. And so this organizational improv is really critical. So I think part of the job is this cultural challenge. It seems weird that you would have the chief data monetization officer own that, but maybe that's because that's the wrong title. Maybe it needs to be a chief innovation officer who not only owns the innovation around data and analytics, but also owns the innovation around empowering teams.
So what we talked about before we got into this was exactly that. You know, we have got so many, let's see, we've got, and here's some titles that I've seen recently. Chief AI officer, chief data officer, chief analytics officer, chief data and information officer. Where does it end? And, you know, you and I were saying that why didn't we just have a chief data and analytics officer? Because to be honest, the two need to be together and they need to be in sync with each other, right? But we've got these pools of talent everywhere, or, you know, obvious titles. But now to embed the chief data monetization officer, what does that do? Because now we're talking about making money out of our data, which, you know, it was a question I had here about why is it so difficult for organizations to think about monetizing data? It's you know, there are only a few people in the whole, organizations in the whole world who do this. You and I know who they are, right? We don't need to espouse their names because, God, they do it so well. Why is it that we continuously see organizations not being able to break that ceiling? It's not about selling a bit of data, but what is the challenge for these organizations? And we'll get back to, I remember I'm going to write it down. We'll get back to titles in a minute, but you just, something else fired off in my brain. So,
well, I think they're related in the sense that we create these boxes. Chief data officer, you sit here. Chief analytics officer, you sit here. You know, chief data governance officer. You sit here, right? Organizations are so fixated on creating boxes. And by the way, every high-end management consulting firm that comes in to try to unleash the value in organization, the first thing they do is they put more boxes out there. Boxes, friggin' boxes, right? Right? No, boxes contain.
Yes.
They don't empower. You don't want boxes. You want swirls. You want to have a single organization where somebody who is a chief analytics officer and a chief data officer, maybe collaborating with a chief innovation officer, they're working in a swirl about how do we monetize not only our data, but our people? How do we get more value out of our data and analytic assets, but how do we empower our people to get more value, right? It needs to be swirls, and putting people into boxes is a guaranteed way for failure because people become so entrenched in boxes. I friggin' hate boxes. I think boxes is the great killer of innovation, right? And so I think you have this proliferation of titles because organizations haven't changed the frame of how they think about business. We still have organizations that were designed in the 1950s and 60s, right after World War II. The World War II was fought with a very, command and control structure. The general made this, right? Exactly. Everybody followed the orders. World's changed. World's changed, right? You can't, the person at the top can't possibly know as much about what's happening as
the people on the front lines. Yeah. And I think that's what you talk about as well. You talk about organizations that still have this legacy thinking that is killing innovation. And for me, that's really interesting because the way that you set that framework is to suggest that many titles are happy with doing these 5 to 7 year legacy projects, which will put in this big behemoth of an application. And that's what they want on their CV. So from that, how do we bash that all up, and how do we then start to mod? I mean, the swirls that you talk about, and then bring these types of roles and titles together that actually get the value out of data that we need, so that one, we can make money, because essentially that's what we're supposed to be there doing. But we can create this innovation that is deep innovation ingrained in this organization, because the Googles and the Amazons and all of that, they are doing that day in, day out.
Right? Yes. I'm probably more familiar with Google than the others, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's how they think. They execute this organizational improv. It's, the way that they attack a project, it's like watching a good jazz quartet, right? Different people take the lead in different things, and they're riffing off each other, and it's like it's marvelous, and they don't even have a friggin' piece of music in front of them, right?
Yeah.
There's no right. They're just working with each other, and you see this with great sports team. I like to talk about the U.S. women's Olympic soccer team.
Yeah.
They were amazing, and you watch them play, and there wasn't a coach above them saying, Sally, you move here, and Joni, you move there, and you kick over. They have been empowered to do their own thing. And by the way, the 1805, I think it was, the Battle of Trafalgar, Admiral Nelson taught us the power of empowering teams. And so it isn't like it's anything new. Yet organizations have this desire to put people in boxes. And until they figure out that boxes aren't how you win, it's with these swirls, these organizational improv, that I believe more than AI and ML adoption, the ability to get rid of the boxes and create swirls will differentiate the winners from the losers in this world of transformation. Because getting back to a point earlier, when you put swirls in place, you learn more quickly. You try, test, right? And you all of a sudden, the whole organization is learning. It's not a box learns here and tries to figure out how to get that knowledge over to something else. So it's, again, the destruction of the boxes has got to be imperative.
And it's interesting you say that, because I think now what we're seeing more and more, we used to talk about organizational silos, right? Now we're talking about organizational data silos, which for me is really interesting, because now we've morphed it into, protecting our bit of data, or, you can't have that because it's mine. And I think that's another thing that we've just sort of taken it one level down, and so innovation can never happen in those types of organizations, because there's a lot of stifle thinking. But the organizational development and change is a huge topic, and let's sorry, go ahead.
One last point is this is why I think medium-sized organizations have a big advantage over large organizations.
Yeah,
because they can make that kind of cultural transformation.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a CEO who has a kind of vision, aspiration, and can turn the org chart upside down and put the people in the front lines in charge.
Yes.
They will run right past the bigger players. Right past, because they're going to leverage their agility and the economies of learning to reinvent their business processes, to disintermediate customer relationships, and to totally disrupt traditional business models.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, and I think the way to do that is to empower the front lines and so on, and it's the responsibility and the accountability that you give them, and so that they can make a tough decision, and as you said, they can learn from it, and that's the continuous learning that they all embed. So back to the innovation or strategy or data or analytics officers, where do we need to get to in that pool of endless titles?
We need somebody who owns monetizing data.
Okay.
Somebody's got to own that. They've got to be able to have the responsibility and the authority. I mean, a lot of these roles don't have teeth. Let's be really honest, right? The chief analytics officer is going to have very little success telling the head of one of the business units that they need to do something a certain way. Like, nah, I make the money, you don't, right? And so they need to have both the responsibility and the authority to mandate out data silos, to mandate out orphaned analytics. You're going to only build analytics in this way. We're going to house them all here. We're going to have a centralized repository of analytics. We're going to put in place a structure for how you build these things, right? So you got to have somebody who's got teeth, who owns the monitor, can mandate it, right? Can make it happen.
So is that person already within the business? Is that person maybe somebody who's got a design thinking background and can bring some very, very different way of thinking? Or is it how high or low in the organization? Or is it all about the generation of excitement and
no, it's not about excitement,
right?
Because that doesn't pay the rent.
That doesn't
right?
pay. So where does this person absolutely? You class them as the chief monetization officer. I mean, let's get away from the chief. And let's just think of data monetization and say, right, okay, we're going to monetize our data.
So I believe this role needs to be able to straddle across all different parts of the organization. If your CEO truly believes that data is the new oil, in the sense that
don't say that.
No, let me explain that then. So I think this phrase is very provocative, because in the same way that oil fueled the economic growth in the 20th century, data will be the catalyst for the economic growth in the 21st century. So it's got a lot of power. So if you as a CEO really believe that, that's step one. If you don't believe that, then all bets are off. But if you believe that data is the source of economic growth in the 21st century, then the single most important question that organization needs to be able to answer is, how effective are you at leveraging data and analytics to power your business models? Okay. How important is that to you?
Agreed.
And do you have a single person who owns that question? Which you should, right? And so if the CEO believes that data is the new oil, the source of economic growth in the 21st century, if the CEO believes that we need to become more effective at leveraging data and analytics, we talk about it from going from descriptive analytics, predictive, prescriptive to autonomous analytics, right? If you believe that, then you need to have a single person who owns that, and it probably needs to report to the CEO. And here's the reason why. They've got to be able to reach across all the parts of the organization. They've got to be the common thread, because there's maybe the COO is a common thread today, but you need to have somebody who's a common thread and allowing organizations to share the data and more importantly, share the customer, product, and operational insights that come from that data to help fuel their use cases.
Yeah, I agreed. So, we are talking about, and I'm in wild agreement with you. But right now, as you said earlier, we've got the chief data officer, analytics officer. We've got a governance, leader in place.
Yeah.
We've got so and so, and God knows, as long as my arm right now. Layer upon layer of these people, right, which don't have budgets, don't have the outcomes that they want from, as you quite rightly said, the business is saying, well, I'm the one that makes the money, so just walk away.
Right.
Essentially, is it somebody? Do we need to go back to the old, way of, not old way, but do we have to have something like a chief strategy and innovation officer? Is that what we're gunning for, or, because there's just it's getting pretty weighty and crowded in that C-suite.
Here's the title is not nearly as important as the responsibility, authority, and you said a key word, budget.
Yes.
Right. If they have the responsibility and authority, but no budget, well, they don't have any authority.
No.
Right.
No, not at all.
If you don't have any money and you didn't got any, this is all about, this role has to have teeth. And not only do they need to have budget, but you have to be able to measure their outcomes or success based on the outcomes they're driving to the business.
Sure.
That's a must, right? So, so I think whatever the title might be, this person has to own budget, and that budget has to be focused on helping the other parts of the organization derive value. So now we've gone full loop.
Yeah.
We started the conversation talking about value, right? We've come around all the way full loop on value, because that is the key point.
You
need somebody in the organization who owns driving value from the data and analytics. And we know that the value is only created by the business units who are trying to deliver product and services to their customers and constituents.
Yep, I agree. So let's agree on that in terms of the value piece and in terms of the individual or individuals that take that on. I think let's just move to another topic. In your book, the latest one, you talk about the big data maturity curve.
Yes.
And you talk about this thing called the Analytics Chasm. Why is that a challenge for many organizations?
The Analytics Chasm, the reason why I believe the Analytics Chasm exists, and the Analytics Chasm in the Big Data Business Model Maturity Index, it's what prevents companies from going from descriptive reports and dashboards that measure what happened to predictive reports that tell you what's likely to happen and prescriptive actions. So it's the preventer.
Right.
And here's the problem with the Analytics Chasm. It's owned by the CIO. So it's treated as if it's a technology problem.
Right.
And we see companies just dumping technology into the chasm, trying to solve the problem. And I'll tell you right now, the crossing the chasm is not a technology problem. It's an economics problem. And in particular, it's a nano economics problem. If you think about economics, we've had macroeconomics, microeconomics, and what we're seeing today is the birth of a concept, economics, which is about the identification and exploitation or monetization of individual human or device propensities.
Okay.
Right. I can cross an analytics chasm if I go from looking at data from an averages perspective, which is what happens in descriptions, to becoming very granular focused on individuals and their propensities. So that if I want to predict who's likely to leave the organization, I can't do it based on averages. I have to have a score on everybody in the company on their propensity to leave. Think about it like a FICO score.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world's got a FICO score, right? We can create a score on somebody's likelihood to leave. We can create a score on someone's likelihood to conduct fraud. We can create a score on the likelihood to promote or likely to recommend. When you think about this, it's about getting down to that granular level of nano economics where I built these propensities and understand these scores so I can take laser-like precision decisions in order to cross that chasm so that I can predict. I can't predict based on averages. Well, I can predict, I just don't know how to act. And by the way, I would argue, my favorite my favorite paragraph in this book is the opening paragraph in the preface, right? Because it talks about why I wrote this book.
Yep.
And I wrote this book because I was so frustrated by what was going on in the world with these overly generalized policy and operational decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We were making decisions based on averages, and the world was just going down a toilet. We were circling the drain going on a toilet because we kept making decisions based on averages. No, we need to get precision. And again, crossing the chasm requires us not to look at the volume of data, but to look at the granularity and to build these propensity scores and models that we can use to drive decisions on a very precision, granular basis.
So you're almost talking about, another a term that people might use, which could well be hyper-personalization, which,
yes.
It's the way that you look at it in the most granular aspects so that I can move Samir along that customer journey and I can know the triggers and I know what decisions to make based on a value exchange between my company and him, or him and my company. And I think that's what you're
it's more than just humans though, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Hyper-personalization from a human perspective means you understand my tendencies, propensities, inclinations.
Exactly.
And you're using that to really better serve me. But I can apply that to devices too. Things.
Right. Okay.
Right? I can figure out what parts are likely to break, when they're likely to replace.
Yes.
Who's the best person to fix it. I get down to those very precision. So and the interesting thing here is what the ramifications of this nanoeconomics is. We can use this to transform our economic value curve, to overcome the law of diminishing returns, and to transform it so that we can do more with less, because we're finally focusing what we're going to do, and we're not wasting our time chasing things that don't need to be fixed.
Yep. And I think that's why I like your that's why I like the way you've put it in your book. I'm not an economist, so I look at it and I say, okay, now I've got to get into my head into economics. But actually, you've sort of said it's the economic return of valuing that data. And I'm not talking about a valuation on data. I'm talking about how that value of data can drive a new business model or a new process or whatever it might be. So for me, I'm a simple person. I just like to look at things very, break them down and really understand. That's the only way I can do it. So I think, when I look at the book, and I know I haven't come to the chapter of economics yet, which I'm dreading, because that wasn't always my best, that wasn't always my best subject. But so this term nano economics, is that something that you had to come, is it a generalized term out there, and is it something that
so it's not in the book,
right?
Actually, it's not in the book. It's something that's come up in the last 2 months since the book
okay, so it's new. Right. I got you. Okay.
So and my goal has been that I don't want the book to be a dead document. I want it to be a living document.
Absolutely.
As I uncover new things, there's 2 topics in particular that I'm working on that I want people to be able to, print and clip into their books.
Yeah.
One's around nanoeconomics and one's around AI ethics, but we'll talk about that. But the nanoeconomics, the term has been used before, but it was about singular transactions.
Okay.
And what I've done is I've modified to say it's not the transaction I'm interested in, it's the propensities that I can develop about individual human or device. It's about that, propensities are basically predictions, what they're likely to do.
Yeah.
And it isn't having the transaction that's any value. It's ability to turn that transaction into a prediction as far as what's likely to happen. Next. Now I've gone down this path of moving towards this term that you and I both hate, which is digital transformation, right? But it is moving organizations further down the path for how do I leverage data and analytics to really optimize my business models and my operations. So I have taken the term nanoeconomics, and I'll claim that I've made it more relevant. A term that was probably came out many years ago, but never really talked about. And again, you're going to have to, I'll make sure you find the blogs I've written about it, because I'm going to spend more time on it. But it gets back to this goal of, I don't want this thing to have written this thing and then I'm done. Right? Put me to rest. I want this book to be a centerpiece around which we can share ideas around things like nanoeconomics, like AI ethics, and whatever else comes out in the future.
Just one thing about that, though. The book is not really about, and I think this is what I got from it. This book is not really like Doug Laney's Infonomics. It's not about putting data on a balance sheet. It's not about the accounting procedures of that, right? You're saying that can be something, but what I'm trying to do is to sweat this asset to get the best out of it that I can for an organization and to drive that revenue or those cost efficiencies or whatever it might be. So data monetization from your aspect is slightly different from Doug's.
Yes, and you're spot on. I want to use the term sweat out the analytics. That's a great term, right? I want to put, if we think about what difference between an accounting monetization perspective and an economics, accounting is a value in exchange monetization method, which is the value of an asset is based on what someone's willing to pay you for it. And in order to get data onto how the gap defines assets today, we need to find somebody who's willing to say, well, that data, I'm willing to pay you this much for the data. And then you can put it on your balance sheet. And that's even, that's a really hard problem. Sure. And Doug's doing a great job of wrestling with that. I cheated. I just said, I'm not gonna go down that. That's too hard. That's Doug, you're doing a great job. You've done that bit. Yeah. You do that, Doug. What I'm going to focus on is the economics. And economics is a valuation in use. Yes. The value of an asset is how you use it, which is why, a car, let's say it's a $30,000 car, why that $30,000 car is worth more to an Uber driver than it is to me, right? Because they're using that car to generate more value. They're
sweating the car. They're
sweating the car, right? They're using it. And so if you push aside the accounting requirements and worry about, don't worry about putting it on the books. Who gives a shit? Who gives a hoot, right? It doesn't matter. The most important thing is how am I using that data? So is just sweating it to get more value, to improve customer retention, to reduce operational downtime, to reduce inventory, right? And so I cheated. I got lazy. But if I take that economics approach, this whole thing becomes much easier to grok and move forward on.
Yeah. No, I like that. And, I think we've got to get to that term that is on the front of the book, digital transformation. It's talked about every day. It's in every, article that comes up. It's one of those things that people, day in, day out are waffling on about. And I don't like to use the term waffle, but there is. Well, what are the key success factors to this thing called digital transformation? Because I see most companies doing digital, and they're not really changing their business model. They're not activating anything. All they're doing is just putting a bit of tech on top of an old process, and they expect it to get better and drive more outcomes. But what do we need to do as organizations to become more effective and to absolutely drive this thing called digital transformation?
So this is a good question. And I take a shot at a definition in the book. And my definition is really built around creating a continuously learning and adapting culture. That I believe that the companies that are going to survive any transformation, now we're talking digital, some point in time, it's going to be, some other, Bitcoin or whatever. There's going to be something else out there, right? It's going to quantum computing, right? It'll cause them organizations that are going to survive in a world of continuous transformation. By the way, transformation isn't just technology.
No,
you have social, you have environmental, you have people, all kinds of different kinds of transformation taking place. The organizations that are going to win are those that are going to be able to continuously learn and adapt faster than their competition. That's the bottom line, right? I got to be able to learn and adapt faster than my competition. That has two aspects. The digital transformation has two aspects. There's the digital AI, ML data side of it, building these analytic assets using AI and machine learning and reinforcement learning that are continuously learning. There's that aspect, but there's also the human aspect. That how do we empower humans so they're continuously learning, and how do I optimize that machine-human interface so that they're learning together more rapidly than my competition?
And that's the biggest thing that most organizations struggle with. And we've talked about that, I think, endless in terms of, how those two things come together certainly through your frameworks and others. So listen, I think, we're getting to the point where we've run over.
That's okay. It was great. This is a good conversation.
And as I said to you, I'd put almost 18 different themes in my notepad. So listen, I think the final words. Where can people learn more about you? Obviously there's the books. How can they reach out to you? Where can they find you?
The best place is I post all my blogs on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get the latest stuff on the nanoeconomics and on ethical AI, I post everything on LinkedIn. Also, I post everything I write on Twitter as well. I stay in my swim lane on Twitter. I don't go outside the general Twitter universe. I stay within the data science, big data stuff.
Okay.
I also publish on Data Science Central as well.
Yeah.
So you can reach me on LinkedIn very safely. Ask me questions. I really love questions because that tells me what I didn't explain well. I mean, I love to write because writing forces me to be very succinct in what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And many times I fail at that. And sometimes it'll take me 2 or 3 times to get it right. So again, visit me on LinkedIn. And by the way, I do lots of conference keynotes and things. Please, join me for one of those. Get involved in the Q&A session afterwards. Ask me questions. Everything's fair game.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. I have had a wonderful time, an animated time, I think, in this. But, hopefully you can feature on the show again. And I just look forward to reading more about the book. And hearing more about AI ethics and building on some of the nanoeconomic stuff, which again, I'm not going to dread because it's economics, but I'll try and veer away from that.
It's the best stuff of economics. It isn't all the crazy ass stuff. There's no econometrics in here. Trust me.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay, well, look, I love all of what we've discussed, and I really want to thank you hugely, for being on the show today.
Thanks, Samir. It was a fun, good conversation. You came prepared, which is always a good sign.
Thank you very much.